Welcome everyone. Today we are here to celebrate the retirement of our dear Professor Stephen Voss'a. He has dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of thought and the art of teaching. Since 1993, I teach at our department. He has touched the minds and hearts of hundreds of people. Everyone whose path has crossed with Boğaziçi and our department has been deeply influenced by his wisdom, his insight, and his perspective on life. During the challenging times taking place within our university, our country, and where we live in, wherever we happen to cross paths, whether in a lecture, walking across campus, or waiting in those shuttle lines, the light of his wisdom always reached us. From profound philosophical discussions to casual faith talk, we always left aside with a smile, a sense of hope, or a productive confusion that keeps us thinking. We feel incredibly fortunate to have witnessed a life so richly filled with philosophy and lived experience, and more than anything, to have been his students. Today, we mark the conclusion of an academic journey dedicated to learning and teaching. While we are deeply saddened that we will no longer be able to take his courses, we are immensely grateful for everything he has given us. We are forever grateful for the depth and dedication he brought to our university, our department, and our personal philosophical journeys. Mr. Voss, you will always be remembered and cherished by your students and your colleagues. Thank you for that.
Welcome again, everyone, and thank you for being here. Before inviting Professor Voss to the stage, I would like to briefly say a few words. Professor Stephen Voss'a completed his undergraduate studies at Wheaton College, where he majored in mathematics and minored in philosophy, graduating in 1962. He then pursued graduate studies in philosophy at the University of California, Berkeley, before continuing to Stanford University, where he completed his PhD in 1968. Since 1993, he has been a professor of philosophy at Boğaziçi University, where he has made an extraordinary contribution to our university and to us. We feel very, very fortunate to have had him as part of this institution for so many years, and it is truly a privilege to be here today. Professor Voss, the floor is yours.
Isn't it great to be here? Isn't it great to be together with all of our friends? And really, I want this to keep happening. I want us to keep coming together. One suggestion I'm making is, if you hear anything worth remembering, take notes. There's a little empty space on this piece of paper. Just like BÜFET, I want to encourage community among philosophers here. We seldom see Galatasaray people or coach people and so on and so forth. Let's not let that happen anymore. So let's continue making community. Yes, yes. And I'll be part of it. And I want you to be part of it. Now, Pico della Mirandola, one of my favorite philosophers, said, I have been accused by powerful figures in this country, Italy, of pretending to be a wise man by writing books they were angry with Pico, and perhaps somebody killed him. He died in his early 30s. But in his oration on the dignity of man, Pico said, we do philosophy by having dialogues. He's following Plato's model. And he says, who is it in a Platonic dialogue who gains wisdom? It's not Socrates. It's the person who loses the debates. They learn something. And so we have to be a little schizophrenic when we're doing philosophy. I do my best to defend my position, but more importantly, I do my best to listen to people attacking it. So today, let's lose some debates. Yeah, let's become more wise. Really, today, what I would like to do is tell you a little about my history, my philosophical history. And I can tell you some things that happened when I was a little child. I had a good friend, I think I was about 8 years old, a good friend named Alex. And we used to play baseball and do things together. And one day I'm walking towards his house. It's about 4 houses away from our house. I see Alex walking toward me, and it occurs to me, I will never know Alex. I'm just seeing his face, his strange hair, his interesting clothes. I can hear him shouting at me, but I don't see or hear Alex. And I've thought that all my life in a kind of Cartesian spirit. Here is my soul, here is your soul. I'm never going to make contact. And while I've been in Turkey, I have realized that was a mistake. We can become known if we make the effort to other human beings. We can. And that's an important fact, and it would surprise Descartes. Now, a few years later, one Saturday morning, my father knocked on my door to the bedroom. I was still in bed. He said, I'm going shopping. He was very efficient at getting things done on the weekend. I'm going shopping today, Stephen, but while I'm gone, would you cut the grass? Would you cut the grass? And I said, sure, I will. And about an hour later, he came back. He's done shopping. I'm still in bed. He says, this is not right. I asked you while I was gone to cut the grass. And I said, Dad, I'm a lazy person. What do you expect? It's predictable that I would still be in bed. That's who I am. Nothing for us to talk about. Well, I think there's a lot of truth in what I said there, and yet it's not the whole truth. There is another voice in me that says, get up, achieve something, do the work there is. And I could have listened to that. Now, in both the case of my father and Alex, it takes work to show that my intuitions were mistaken. It takes work, but they were mistaken. It is possible for us to be unpredictable. I want to talk about that a bit later on in the hour. And the last thing that happened to me, I'll tell you, when I was a little kid, every morning my mother would make breakfast, of course, and I never liked the breakfast. It could be eggs, it could be cereal, it could be bacon. whatever she fixed, I said, I don't like it. So one day, she puts a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me, and she says, now look, I have a bottle of ketchup. You can put ketchup on the eggs. The ketchup will make the eggs taste better. And I said, yeah, you're right, but the eggs will make the ketchup taste worse. And I think that was a deep insight. Yes, I think so. In other words, in any philosophical debate, there is something correct in what my dialogue partner is saying. There are two sides to most issues, and I have to appreciate both sides of them. So I think that last intuition was good. Yeah. So, okay, life went on. I hadn't yet learned how to spell the word philosophy, but in lycée, they started telling me, we think you are an intelligent boy. You are intelligent enough to become an engineer. And I said, well, thank you so much. So I went to college as an undergraduate. I majored in mathematics, and I took a physics class the very first year. And I was a mathematics student. But I had a wonderful teacher, a British man named Arthur Holmes, and he absolutely transformed the educational experience. He was a history of philosophy teacher, and he showed us, obviously, you know, amazing classical geniuses' writings. And it really made such an impact in a deep way on me. So I decided the last year as an undergraduate to do graduate work in philosophy, not mathematics. And I thought I'd better tell my old mathematical teacher what I'm going to do. She was a somewhat older woman. She was an absolute whiz when it came to mathematics teaching. I knocked on her door, come in. I came in, and I said, Dr. Brandt, her name was Angeline Brandt. I said, Dr. Brandt. She said, yes, Mr. Voss. She always called us Mr. and Miss. I said, maybe you won't like this news, but I want you to know when I go to graduate school, I will not be studying mathematics, I'll be studying philosophy. And she said, okay, she said, she accepted it. She said, you know, in mathematics, sometimes we cannot find the answer to a question. It's true. But those people, the philosophers, those people don't understand the questions. And she is right. We deal with questions that we really very often do not clearly have a grasp on. And part of the work in getting an answer to a question is clarifying the question, and it's work very often. She was right. I don't take that as an insult to philosophers, because what we have chosen to do is to be open to questions that are so deep that we have trouble understanding them. And the mathematicians don't understand those questions any more than we do. Well, Um, Really, why I moved from mathematics to philosophy was because I thought some of the questions we deal with in philosophy matter. Some of them are important, more important than whether the continuum hypothesis is correct or not correct. It's very exciting to do mathematics, but it's not important the way philosophy can be important. So maybe today we do a little question clarifying. That would be nice. I want to look at some questions that I've been thinking about. I'm looking at number 3 on this piece of paper. Here's a question. There are indexical truths and non-indexical truths. By an indexical word, I mean a word such that if you put it in a sentence, that sentence can be both true and false. For example, I think. Right now it's false for me, but it's true for you. You see, the very same sentence is both true and false. That's what I mean by an indexical sentence. A sentence containing such a expression that could make for both truth and falsity. Okay. Now, some of those indexical questions we ask are really important to us. I think it's interesting to ask, is Socrates mortal? But I'm more interested in knowing, am I mortal? My question is indexical. I want the true indexical answer, true for me. Now, I'm thinking of a fact making a sentence true. For example, the man in the blue shirt thinks. Well, I'm the man in the blue shirt, and I think. So that's a true sentence. True, period. It's a non-indexical truth. Compare it with the sentence, I think. Well, that's true for me. It might not be true for other persons. Now, what is the nature of that first indexical fact that makes that first sentence true? You've got 3 elements. You've got the person wearing that shirt, the person, we're directly referring to him. He's part of the fact. Then you've got the subject property of that sentence, wearing a blue shirt, the person who wears the shirt. And then you've got the predicate property, thinking. And when you put those together in a fact, you get the fact that person is the man in the blue shirt and is thinking. Good. Well, what about I think? When I put the same elements together, I get, first of all, the same individual, this individual. Secondly, the subject property. What's the property guaranteed by the meaning of the word I? I is simple. I is a person. Here's another indexical expression. Now is a time. Here is a place. Okay. Very little content to the subject term in this indexical sentence. Okay, so I have the person, I've got the property of being a person, and in the fact, I've got the property of the predicate thinking. The only difference in those two facts that make those two things, two sentences true, the only difference is the lack of conceptual content in the subject part of the fact. That's the only difference. And indexical facts metaphysically are uninteresting. They are uninformative. Just the fact that this person is a person and thinks much less information than that first sentence. Uninteresting metaphysically. But there's a philosopher who thinks such sentences are important metaphysically, and this is Thomas Nagel. And Thomas Nagel tells us there are first-person facts in the world. I am the person with all these Thomas Nagel properties. That's so important. Metaphysically, no, it isn't. It isn't. All the word I has done is contribute personhood to the fact, and secondly, to help us identify the subject that the fact is about. That's all it's done. That's all the word I has done. Nothing cosmic. There are no first-person facts. There are indexical facts, the one I just told you about, this boring fact. Yeah, but nothing metaphysically exciting. And that is not a first-person fact. That fact, I think, is true for me. And I tell you that, okay? No, we're having a conversation. I tell you, hey, you know what? I think. And you know, you might reply to me like this: I absolutely agree with you. You think. You tell me a sentence that is a you sentence that is made true by the very same fact that I told you about when I said I think. It's the same fact. That fact, this person thinks, makes a first-person truth and a second-person truth true. It's not a first-person fact, but Thomas Nagel says these first-person sentences cannot even be understood by anybody else. But of course they can. Try it. See if you can understand this. Careful. Nagel says it's a big job you cannot do. See if you can understand, I think. You did it. And you not only understood it, you agreed with me on the fact that makes what I said true. I completely agree with you, Voss. So, Boschfair. Now, indexical truths that are not important metaphysically, they're not an interesting metaphysical category. They are simply fairly uninformative truths. But the importance of indexical facts is their role in our thinking. For example, theoretical thought, scientific thought begins with observations like, I see an amoeba right now dividing into two parts. I see. And the data that generates theory in science is indexical facts. I saw that now. And we do our best to work from that indexical data to non-indexical theory. But we begin with indexical truths. And practically speaking, indexical facts matter to us in the way we live. I'll give you a simple example from Aristotle, who talks about practical reasoning. He gives this example. Here's some practical reasoning. All men should walk. It's a kind of wish, a value that he's expressing. It would be good for all men. For each man, it would be good that that man walks. Okay, I got that premise. That's not going to move me to act. It's a non-indexical wish. It's not indexical. All men should walk. What moves me to take a walk? My belief, I am a man. Now I put those two things together and I start walking. Immediately, the conclusion I have drawn in my practical reasoning becomes an action. I cannot act voluntarily unless I accept at least one indexical truth. They're what matter to me when it comes to action, when it comes to how I live. So in those practical terms, as well as in those scientific projects, human beings care a lot about indexical facts. But they are not first person or second or third person. They're just indexical. Okay, that was fun. And so that's one question, and that's my answer. And of course, what matters isn't, is my answer true? What matters is whether the kind of thinking I just presented to you encourages you to see things that you haven't seen before. That's what matters. I'm not giving you truths. I'm acting like a catalyst. I'm not pouring wisdom into your head, but I'm making gestures that might encourage you to do the work of getting wisdom. That's what a teacher is in philosophy. Sometimes I tell my students, I didn't teach you anything. You did all the work. And that's, you see, there's a point to that, isn't there? Oh, I have to tell you about another indexical fact. Did I mention Annie Beachbowl Hesperius to you? Well, in 1996, it was the 400th anniversary of Descartes' birth. And in France, people were absolutely going crazy, making unbelievable conferences up and festivals. I have a book that's called Descartes, c'est la France. Descartes is France. And that's how they feel. That's how they feel. He's kind of the intellectual Ataturk of France. And so it was such a wonderful time. And I read a paper at one of these festivals. Now, 6 years earlier, one of the great Descartes scholars, Geneviève Rodus-Lewis, had published a wonderful book called Cartesian Anthropology, the study of Descartes' theory of human beings. And 2 years earlier, I had written a paper on the same subject, unbeknownst to me about her book. My paper was Descartes, the end of anthropology, because I drew the conclusion from looking at his later writings that he stopped believing there is a substance composed of soul and body. He didn't have any theory about that. He just said, any truth you want to give me about a human being, it's either about the soul or the body or their relations. There's no composite object. Well, I think she was not happy when I mentioned this point I was about to make. She was sitting with a protege of hers, a young woman named Annie Beatball Hesperius. And after the talk, we all got up to leave, and she looked in my direction. She's walking out with Geneviève. She looked in my direction, and she said to Geneviève, "Il est fou. Il est fou." That means he's crazy. And Geneviève said, right, yeah. But that's another indexical. Now, I don't know if it's a fact or not. Look, probably all of us are a little crazy. Okay. But I don't look on that as anything bad, because if you read Plato's Phaedrus, you learn there are good kinds of craziness and bad kinds of craziness. And Socrates says in the Phaedrus that philosophical craziness is divine. Something comes into our intellect, into our reason from above, and gets in the way of us functioning normal in society. Okay, we're a little crazy, but we have gained contact with reality. This is a good kind of craziness. So I admit, yes, Rhoda Slavis, yes, Ani, you are right, I'm crazy. Hopefully it's a good kind, hopefully. We're not going to fit into society. We are philosoph, not felsefegi, I would say. We're not just doing a job, we're seeking wisdom. We aren't wise, but we're trying. I've outlined about 8 questions, something like that. No, 6 questions. I can't deal with all of them. I don't know which I should mention. Let me go to question number 5. What principle stands behind judgments of personal identity over time? A kind of normal metaphysical question about what it is to be a person. Personal identity tells us something about the nature of persons. Okay, so I was interested in that question, and I began by looking not at persons, but at amoebas. Interesting situation, because amoebas reproduce by dividing in 2. And I want to ask a good philosopher, has that terminated the existence of that amoeba? Did it somehow survive in one of those new amoebas? Okay, and what's going on here in terms of amoebic identity? Well, I had a suggestion that I wanted to follow out. The suggestion was, no amoeba died, it's doing fine. It's not death. Don't talk about it ceasing to exist. And really, dying is about the only way a living being can cease to exist. That amoeba did not achieve dying, so it still exists. But which one of them is it? You can't choose. The idea that came to me was, all that's happened is that amoeba has divided into two parts. And those two parts are not contiguous. They're not touching each other anymore, but that amoeba still exists. And if you want to point to one of those two little guys and ask, I want to identify a certain amoeba, the one I'm pointing to, you've only pointed to a part of it, but the amoeba is the combination, the compound of those two divided parts. That was my strange, crazy idea. And I'll tell you a principle that occurred to me. I call it the amoeba principle. Any amoeba that emerges from amoebic fission is identical with the original amoeba. It's just got two separate parts, that's all. And if one of those parts is destroyed, the amoeba lives on. It just lost half of its matter. The amoeba lives on. And then I thought, that can help us with personal identity, because one thing that happens in the life of a woman who is about to become a mother is this. Some amoebic type fission. An ovum separates itself from the rest of her body. Okay? Topologically, the same sort of thing that happened with the amoeba. And so you can point to either one of those and say that's part of the woman. And if the woman's body is destroyed, the woman lives on in that ovum. And if that ovum continues to carry out the normal function of a woman, the woman has survived. And then, yeah, okay? I know, not okay. But that suggests to me that you're thinking. I'm reminded of something Cicero said. There is nothing so absurd that no philosopher has said it. Okay, that's what you're hearing now. Okay, that's all right. And I'll get even more absurd. The inverse amoeba principle. We've looked at what happens when a living being separates into two parts. Now, the opposite can happen. What looks like two living beings can merge and become one. And that's what happens with that ovum. It merges with a sperm cell. And so the inverse amoebic principle, it says that the zygote that results from the fusion of ovum and spermatozoa is identical with each one of them. Identity is preserved. And what we're doing here is taking seriously biological facts, which philosophers have not done a good job with historically. We've done a great job with physics, not such a good job with biology. And so I'm trying to take seriously how it is in a question of identity that biology gives us the relevant facts. And the upshot of this is going to be that I am identical with my child. I am the very same person as my child. And by the same reasoning, I am the same person as my mother. And I'm the same person as my father. So they must be the same person by transitivity and symmetry. And when we look at one little amoeba, we are actually looking at one tiny part of an organism that has billions of parts. And when I look at one human being, the fact is that perhaps there is only one human being with their identity grounded in the biological process of human reproduction. I'm not going to go into all the details of the reasoning, but that's the conclusion that this reasoning leads to. It began with a simple realization. I've told you all the facts about what happens when an amoeba reproduces, and you still do not have any intuitions about whether there is continued identity. We don't understand personal identity or even simple amoebic identity. And Derek Parfit reminds us that what really matters is those biological facts. Forget the word identity. We don't understand the question we're asking. Thank you, Dr. Brandt. You are right. We don't understand our own question. We see all the biological facts about that amoeba. We don't know what they add up to in a question of identity. So look, I gave you a crazy theory with an amoebic principle and an inverse amoebic principle, and look at where it leads to. The idea that perhaps there's only one human being, one massive human organism, biologically linked in such a way as to preserve identity. Now, I think you have a different theory. I don't know what you're going to say about the amoeba, but you're going to say when one of us dies, it's finished. I don't care how many children you have. I don't care about the fact that ordinary non-philosophers sometimes say things like, I will live on through my children. Maybe they have an insight. But okay, you've got a different picture of personal identity, and you think there are 8 billion individual human beings. Descartes would agree with you. Okay. Two different theories. Now, how do we choose among those two theories? Well, given our failure to grasp the concept of personal identity, we cannot really definitively show one of those two theories is correct. And I would agree with Parfit, who says the important thing is the biological facts that we're basing our thinking on. Don't forget those facts. And we often do. When we're angry with our mother, we forget where we came from. A certain ovum meant all the world to us. And we're forgetting that because we're so angry with something she just said to us. What do we do? Well, I would say this. Metaphysically, no answer to the question. Forget it. Because identity isn't a definite enough concept to supply a definite answer given all the biological facts. There's no metaphysical answer. People used to wonder, is Zeus the same god as Jupiter? Oh, heavy metaphysical question. There's no answer to that. And so on. This is one of those questions. But let's look at it morally and practically. One of the suggestions that Jesus makes in the gospel is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that's a great command. I think that's how we ought to live. I'm not an especially good, loving person, but I'm working at doing better at it. It's a good project. Love your neighbor as yourself, but that word as is ambiguous, isn't it? Maybe what the word as, when Jesus uttered it in his own language, maybe what that word means is the Latin qua. Love your neighbor insofar as you are your neighbor. Don't look on your neighbor as a different individual. Don't worry about metaphysical issues. Ask yourself, what's the best way to live? I would suggest a good way to live is to keep in mind those biological facts that Parfit would like us to remember. For moral reasons. Each one of us is more closely linked with one another than we usually think to be true. That's a biological and social reality. Yeah. And so, just out of pure egoism, I'm going to love you. Okay, I don't need altruism. Okay, now, I don't want to talk a whole lot more, so let me just mention a few other thoughts. I'll look briefly at question 4, briefly. Here, I'm picking up on the point in my answer to the third question that indexical facts are important to us in the way we live. They're important to us. I care about whether I am a man. And I care about a lot of I questions. Okay, they matter to us. But in this fourth question, I ask, what is it to conceive of an individual as I? In some way, I have singled out among the 8 billion human beings, one of them, and allowed myself direct reference to one individual by using the word I. How did I do that? Do I attribute some unique property to myself that only I have? Of course not. I don't know anything like that, but I'm certain that I am the one talking now. I know that. And I know very little about who I am. I don't know all those supposedly unique I facts about just this one person. It's not like that. There is no definite description I'm relying on in providing reference to myself. So how do I provide reference to myself? Here's my thought. I'm not going to give you reasoning. I'll just give you the thought that in a very primitive way, I become aware of myself through becoming aware of people in the world. And my concept of myself rests on my conception of other people. And how do I conceive other people? These are organisms, living beings that carry out voluntary actions based on practical reasoning. Okay. And I'm aware, for example, we were talking the other day, and I learned you have a certain desire, and I learned you have a certain belief. Your desire is indexical. It's a desire that you become wealthy. And your belief is that you are a woman, and so on. Okay, that's how I picture the world around me. Agents of voluntary actions that act on their beliefs and desires through practical syllogisms and simpler reasoning than that. Okay, that's my picture. And now there is one set of people's practical thoughts, desires, and beliefs. There's one set of them that is unique. I have a special attitude toward one set of practical thoughts. My practical attitude is to act on them. I'm interested in your reasons for doing what you're doing. Your reasons do not affect me in any direct way. I'm also aware of my reasons, and look at how differently I treat them. I act on them. So my thought is this, that when I use the word I am conceiving the individual who possesses practical reasoning, agency, which I have a practical attitude towards. There's a set of reasons to act that I have a special attitude towards because I act on them. And by the word I mean the individual, that individual. This helps a lot because, for example, it helps me answer a tough question that Descartes raised. According to Descartes, I think, therefore I exist, therefore I am. That's interesting. What principle are you relying on, Mr. Descartes? Well, have you heard of existential generalization? If I say, this being has this property, I can infer there exists a being that has that property. I can infer existence from the subject-predicate statement. And that's what I do with I think. There exists a being that thinks. Okay. That's not the explanation, though. Because on your sheet, you can see a couple of sentences about Gaston, which I learned about thanks to the philosopher Castaneda. Gaston suspects that the Easter Bunny loves Marguerite. And the other sentence, Gaston suspects that I love Marguerite. Now, that first sentence does not allow us to infer that the Easter Bunny exists. It is not that kind of sentence. The word Easter Bunny is part of the content of Gaston's thinking, and we're not giving a property to the Easter Bunny, so no. Gaston may suspect that the Easter Bunny loves Marguerite, even though there is no Easter Bunny. That first sentence can be true. Now look at the second sentence. Gaston suspects that I love Marguerite. Has this ever happened to you? Somebody comes up to you and says, I think you love her. And Castaneda records this fact as one of his examples. The sentence, Gaston suspects that I love Marguerite. And he says, if that's true, it must be true that I exist. And it's not true because of existential generalization. It's true because of the way we conceive of I in a sentence like this, in any other I sentence. And I try and show that in a little paper I wrote, which you would be welcome to look at, because it's a good question why that second sentence is true. And the truth is that Descartes didn't have to presuppose I think. He could have presupposed something like this. Rumor has it that I think. Or Gaston sort of thinks that maybe I think. That would be enough. Descartes could have done that. And you know, philosophers have complained about Descartes. How do you know that there's a substance that thinks? People complain about that. Shouldn't we just say there is thinking, end of discussion? Well, if the thinking is about me, it follows, think about it, it follows that I exist. That's something I try and dig into. Now, we've looked at in what makes I truths true, and we've looked at the concept built into the word I just now. All of this is prior to doing metaphysics and ethics about this self. We're just getting ready for the interesting questions. And there are really interesting questions. And really, I would like, sorry to keep using that word, but I would like to dig into some of those questions more than I have, now that I am not obligated to grade midterm exams. I would like to dig into some of these deeper metaphysical questions. What is this self? So I mentioned a couple of them. Question number 6, it's not one question, it's a multitude of questions that we all face right now. I believe the world is crying out to philosophers to help us deal with AI. And we are the people that can make real contributions. People ask questions like, could an AI agent be conscious? And could an AI agent duplicate everything that this human being can do? Is that within the power, maybe not today, but does the theory of AI make room for a possibility that there could be a machine that duplicates everything that I can do, everything that I can think? I think that's quite a fascinating question. And to answer it, we've got to get clear what we mean by those words. Consciousness, agency, voluntary action. We see ChatGPT giving us sentences using the word I. Do you think that that machine has a concept of itself as a person? That's the question that would be good to investigate. And there's a whole range of questions like this, isn't there? It's a question that one question among the multitude is one that Descartes takes up. In part 5 of the Discourse on Method, Descartes gives an a priori proof that human beings cannot be machines, because human beings are capable of an infinite range of behavioral responses to situations, and no machine can ever do that. This is a car engine. It doesn't help you answer the telephone, and so on. Machines can't do an infinite range, an unlimited range of actions, according to Descartes. And if you ask a machine a range of questions, some of those questions will get no answers. If you ask a human being, you will get answers, Descartes says. So in that way, too, behaviorally and linguistically, in language, human beings have an infinite range of possibilities that no machine could ever have. Well, that's his answer. Read Descartes' 5th part of Discourse on Method, and then apply it to today. We're 400 years later, and see whether that reasoning still applies. And I'll tell you, I suspect Descartes is right about that. I suspect there are things that in principle a machine can never do. And if that's true, the existence of these machines might be a way of helping us understand what is special about human beings. We have something in us that no machine can have within it. And what is it? And what makes me such a being? Well, as my father noticed, very often I behaved like a machine. Predictable, boring. But could I be a different kind of being. I feel the same way I told you about, that with a lot of work, I can become less mechanical. I can make myself what a person should be. When I came into this world, I was a little machine, but with the capacity to transcend that. That's my working hypothesis. One of the questions, and I think I'll stop here. One of the questions I look at is one theory about the relation between mind and matter, and that is cosmic consciousness. Have you heard of this? The idea that our consciousness derives from a consciousness that is spread throughout the universe. It's a kind of panpsychist idea, but not reducing our consciousness to subatomic particles going in the opposite direction and finding the whole universe to be conscious. First of all, we can work on that. That would be a great hypothesis to study, wouldn't it? And to study it, I got to learn what consciousness is, don't I? I have read dozens of articles about consciousness, and I have to tell you, I've learned very little. We're not going about it in the right way. I have a suggestion, and you might put this suggestion in play right now. The best starting point to understand what consciousness is to be aware of it in my own life. To be aware of it. Look at it. Watch it. Pay attention to it. You could write a whole article about it without looking. I wouldn't do that. Let's try it right now. And let's try it the rest of our philosophical lives. Be conscious of the being whose consciousness I want to understand. This has been done in India, for example, in Hindu and in Advaita Vedanta theory. Advaita Vedanta says this. There are 4 kinds of consciousness. There is waking consciousness. That's where you think you learn the truth about reality. Absolutely wrong. Go to sleep. And then a dream will free you from all your presuppositions you bring to sense perception in your waking life. Dreams are better than being awake. And then Advaita says, between dreams, when you're in deep sleep, not dreaming, you are still conscious. And they say that on the basis of their own experience. Well, that's what we need to investigate to see if it's really valid. That's the 3rd kind, and we're getting closer to grasping the nature of what is real, according to Vedanta. And the 4th step is to go beyond deep sleep in the same direction. And you are conscious, period. You have no object of consciousness. You are simply aware. And that's the essence of it. And they take one little step further. All there is to reality is that consciousness that you have made yourself conscious of. And that's their whole metaphysics. And that maybe explains why it is that you and I are the same person. It explains it on a deeper level. Why? Because there's only one consciousness. There is simply consciousness. And if you experience it and I experience, we're at the same place because we are one. We are simply consciousness. You see, I think what would be worth doing is being open to even the craziest hypotheses and giving them a fair look, going beyond just ketchup on scrambled eggs, going beyond that and looking at it from all different angles. That's what we ought to be good at. I think we ought to take everything we believe and hold it up to questioning. That's how we're going to get wisdom, isn't it? And that's what I'd like us all to do from now on, together. That's what I would love to happen. Now, do we have time for questions? I don't know. If you like, we can do some question and answer. Yes. Do you want to talk into this? Okay, that'll help here.
All right, so you said you know yourself thanks to other people. So knowing the rest of the people, the people listening us, you know yourself better. With that in mind, if you were to assume, let's say, you were left alone in an island or in the top of a mountain, will you stop from knowing about yourself from that point on?
If I leave the community and live alone? Good question. It's a danger to live alone. It is. It's a risk, and it can have really distorting impacts on your life and on your philosophical thought. It can, but it doesn't have to have a negative impact. And if you're in the right place, it might be the right thing to do. Go into the desert, go into the forest, and do your dialogue not with another person, with yourself. Think of an interesting philosophical theory that you love, and then think of all the possible objections you can. You don't need another person to do that. Isn't that the way we should do philosophy? How do you think Socrates got wisdom? I understand how Thrasymachus and all his friends got wisdom thanks to Socrates, questioning him. How did Socrates? They didn't question him. He questioned their beliefs. That was the focus. He questioned his own beliefs. So ultimately, it comes down to a question, what am I more in love with, wisdom or ego? Do I just want to defend my own beliefs, or am I after wisdom about what's real? And if it's the second one, I'd be happy to change my ideas, even if I'm alone. I will listen to that other part of me. Yeah. That's my thought. Yes.
Hello. I am a student of yours from 25 years ago, maybe 26, or maybe 27.
Wow. When you were only 4 years old. Yeah.
And I have always loved your classes, and I really didn't think we were going to celebrate it this way, but it couldn't be even a better way to describe it, like to celebrate it. And while before coming here, I posted something on LinkedIn. And I said, learning is relational. Because I wanted to post this occasion. And I said, it's relational because you love to learn the things by people who teach you those things, by things that you love, and by the subjects that you love. And learning happens that way, like you love. And the first class I took from you was called Philosophical Thought in the Matrix Movie. And it was a wonderful course. It made me love philosophy even more. And it really shaped my thinking up until now. And at that time, we started talking days, and then we became friends. And we are still friends. And what happened was, interestingly, today's lecture made me think about maybe philosophy is also relational.
I think philosophy is
What do
relational.
you think about that?
I think so. And even if I'm alone in the desert, I'm talking to myself in a schizophrenic way and listening to myself. Yes.
Last year, during summertime, we were together, and you told me you were going to retire. And I said, how do you feel about that? And you told me you never quit becoming philosophy.
Sure.
So it's something that I cannot quit. So
Sure.
I will always be a philosopher, but a felsefeci.
I think. And I think the same is true of you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. You see, if I begin with being conscious of myself, and I can focus on a couple of really important questions. What sort of being am I? This is a metaphysical question. What is my basic nature? And secondly, who am I? A very individual kind of question. What kind of being am I? For example, I learned who am I? Answer, not mathematician, philosopher. I learned that. And that's something about me. And I think that would be a really valuable project for each one of us, to become so aware of ourselves that we can answer both kinds of questions, the metaphysical and the personal one. Who am I really? What kind of being am I? And you can see that today we just touched on these questions. There is so much work to do, and it's so exciting work. So let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for the talk. It was a lot of ideas that can be written about. But I was wondering about cosmoscientism. So let's connect cosmoscientism, monism, substance monism, and one of the, so far the big challenge for anything monistic like that was to explain diversity, right, which is exactly the opposite of what you are.
True.
So we have diverse perspectives just because we are situated in different places. But what I found interesting at the end of your talk was that you are now saying, oh, that's one problem. But if we go beyond that, as you mentioned, the Indian tradition, and so that in a way kind of almost like erases the issue of diversity. Because if we can bring ourselves to that point in which we are this cosmic mind, but also empty of any kind of perspective or kind of determination, then basically then we can make sense in that way.
Yes.
Of a kind of collective mind. Typically, people don't like collective minds precisely because of diversity.
Yes.
And the idea that we feel as we are individuals.
Yes. We have strong intuitions of diversity. Number one, thanks to the five senses, that you are over there, I am over here, two different people. That's what vision tells me. And secondly, because you have access to your mental life in a way that I could never have. You have access to your actions. I can't do your actions. So it seems on both sensual and conceptual grounds that there are good reasons to believe individuality. And in reply to that, I might say, good points. We take that seriously. We do not forget it. But remember, the five senses fall far short of showing us the real nature of things. Just look at physics today. Physics would deny that there is a blue quality here. Nothing. There's just electromagnetic force here. What do you mean blue? Is that something in your head? Forget the five senses. They only give us a starting point. That's one thing. And the other thing I would say, let's experience the same thing that the Vedanta person experiences. Let's go there, have that experience, and collect new data. And in most of us, there is a kind of reluctance to go beyond the usual domains of study and to take seriously crazy Indian religious people. There is that reluctance. It has merit because there are crazy people we shouldn't listen to. There are. We have to draw the line somewhere. But we've drawn it usually too close to our own beliefs. I say, let's reach out these days. We're going to learn something about what a machine is, something about what a person is, something about what a person can be, something about what consciousness is. And I think we have to begin with our own experience, looking at it in a cold, objective way. And I have no idea what we're going to find out. Yes?
Thank you, Stephen, for this great talk. Many of the issues that we have been talking reminds me of our past talks. Actually, we have been talking a lot of stuff that you have mentioned here. So if I understand you correctly, then you also must be able to understand me as well. Let me make an analogy about your metaphysics of biology, let's say. So, as I understand you, I can assimilate all human beings like a tree, and each of us like a leaf on the branch of the tree, and each leaf is conscious.
Interesting.
But when we look at from the outer perspective, we only see one tree.
There is one organism there, one tree. Yeah.
And every single branch and leaves on those branches are such things like us. I don't know, maybe cats or things do this, or I'm not sure about the limits of your physics.
Well, first, there are many different ways this could go, many different ways. It's, for example, a fundamental question that universal consciousness that people talk about. It is talked about in a serious way by physicists during the late 20th century. Physicists have taken this seriously. And here is Vedantic consciousness, no object, just pure consciousness, no conscious substance or person, just consciousness. And here, very different kind of consciousness. It's my consciousness. There is subject and object here. And what's the relation between my tiny personal consciousness and that cosmic consciousness? And people have worked at finding different answers to that question. And that's really all I can say. In the other side of that piece of paper, I mentioned some readings where people, some of those readings, people investigate that very question. It's a real question, and there's no one answer that I know of. And it's a very difficult question. Looks like your consciousness is one thing, mine is another thing. And yes, we can be close to each other. I put my arm around you, my old friend, and still there's that gap. We have a lot of work to do. But philosophy of mind is getting interesting. With panpsychism and AI, it's going to be a different domain than what we learned about a couple of decades ago. Philosophy of mind, I have no idea where it's going to go. Yeah. We can read a little Descartes, but come on. More questions? Yeah.
Right. Thank you for your talk, Stephen. So you mentioned the phrase from the Gospel, love your neighbour as yourself. There is a philosophical book about that phrase. So there is Kierkegaard, Works of Love, which really unpacks that phrase, and of course bring in other things from the Bible and other things he's drawing on. But one thing Kierkegaard emphasises is the self. If you love neighbour as yourself, you must have a very strongly developed self. So there's something very individualistic about his understanding of our relationship with our neighbour and God. Does that conflict? I mean, first, did you ever come across that book by Kierkegaard or think much about Kierkegaard on these topics? But also, does this element of individualism, does it conflict with your version or your idea of panpsychism?
Panpsychism could go either way. It could say there are many, many consciousnesses. There are many monads that make up the universe. And that could be a panpsychist non-monist theory. Or you could go in the direction, that's Leibniz, you could go in the direction of Spinoza and say there's only one thinking thing. And then, if you're having a thought right now, let's ask who that one is who's having the thought. Only one possibility, God. That's Spinoza's answer. He's the one that has your thoughts. And as some Sufis tell us, perhaps the correct point to make is, I am God, said in the right tone of voice. And your point is that Kierkegaard actually emphasizes the importance of the individual ego?
Yeah, because
yes.
It's not important to love your neighbour as yourself, unless yourself is something very valuable.
That's right, that's right. And we've often heard this idea that to be good at loving and compassion, I have to practice that towards myself too. I have to learn to care for myself. If I believe all human beings or all sentient beings deserve compassion, I'm one of them. And I know that Kierkegaard complains against Hegel, his rival, that Hegel forgot one important thing in his theory of reality. That is, me. He forgot me. And I can't do that. And then, of course, love your neighbor as you love yourself is the standard reading. Do you believe it's true that I care for myself? Look at all the silly actions I do that are destructive to me. Do I really care for myself? Look at how much I drank last night. Of course I don't. I act on impulse. I stay in bed. Thank you, Father. Yeah, I know the right thing for my benefit is to get out of bed. I'm staying in bed. It's a project, I would say, to care for ourselves. I think it's a good project if we don't carry it too far.
Thanks. Do you have questions on that? I can read if you want.
Read it.
On behalf of Nazım Gökhan, I have two questions. I was puzzled with Voss'a's emphasis on practical reasoning employed by Aristotle. All men should walk. I am a man, therefore I should walk. First question, he said. This seems to be just a sort of abstraction that ignores many of the features of acting voluntarily, such as the unconscious elements and many hidden features of intentionality. And his second question, are these sorts of logical abstractions, which are based simply on folk psychology, help us better understand facts about ourselves, biological facts, psychological facts, neuroscientific facts might perhaps help more, he says.
Two good points. Yeah. Let's see. Now, the first thing we're asking is, sorry. First thing we're asking, yeah, can we back that up?
Yeah.
I have two questions.
All men should walk. I am a man, therefore I should walk. So he said, this seems to be just a sort of abstraction that ignores many of the features of.
Well, right, and that's a very unusual situation where all that is relevant to me now are those 2 points. Men should walk, I'm a man. And for example, Aristotle also tries to deal with the issue of weakness of will, in which I have drawn opposing conclusions. I should take a walk, I should not take a walk. And I have good reason to accept those two conclusions. That's one complexity that we haven't even mentioned here. Another one, and he talks about weakness of will in Nicomachean Ethics, and it has to be dealt with. We've been talking about the way that philosophy is essentially schizophrenic. I love this theory, I'm going to fight against it for the sake of wisdom. That's how we live, not just how we do philosophy. And the second point I would make there is, thanks to Joseph Butler, 18th century British philosopher, who emphasizes in his sermons, very often we act not for the sake of some abstract principle, all men should do such and such. We just say, what I care about is, I want to do this action. No reasons. And right at the beginning of Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle says, this is one source of voluntary action. Not that I have reasoned about it in some abstract, principled way. It's just, here's an apple in front of me. I want to eat it. I don't reason at all. I want to stay in bed. Goodbye. I don't even tell you why. I don't have a why. That's another complexity that we have to add to this. Believe me, Aristotle takes us a good distance, doesn't he, in doing justice to those complexities. He really does. And so there's so much more to do. And the second question was,
Can we implement psychological facts, neuroscientific facts, biological facts instead of false psychology kind of point?
I guess philosophers ought to take account of all the facts. And if it's psychology or biology or self-observation, really. And I would suggest, one thing that occurs to me, we ought to take more seriously biology. And we've done too much to listen to physics, not enough to listen to biology. And after all, I think most of us are living beings. Are you? I think she is. Yeah. You're not just a bunch of electrons and quarks. You're a living being. What is that? What is life? One question is, what is physical reality? Next question up, what is life? Next question up, what is mind? And we got to live on all three levels to be good metaphysicians. And we have to listen to science, if it's good science. So I think Nasa made two good points. Yeah. I'm learning. Isn't that why we're here? I am learning. You're asking good questions. More?
Another question from Shirin Yılmaz says, I remember Stephen was always drawn to the philosophy of love. Once on a final exam over 20 years ago, he asked us, is it better to be loved or to be in love, and why? I still find myself wondering how he would answer the question today, and I thought it would be wonderful to bring a bit of Plato's symposium spirit into this already wonderful form.
Oh, I totally agree. Go home and read Plato's Symposium, absolutely. And read Phaedrus. Those are two that will go a little beyond analytic philosophy in a good direction, I would say. Is it better to love or to be loved? Well, Jesus tells us love. He doesn't tell us be loved. And the Buddha tells us be compassionate to every sentient being, not just every human being. Be compassionate. And it strikes me when we, even in our untheoretical, unconscious way, we say, this is a good person. Usually what we mean is, this is a caring person. This is a person that shows compassion. What are you saying when you say this is a good pencil? It makes good marks that we can read on a piece of paper. That's so simple. What are we saying about a human being? Here's a human being that is an unbelievably great basketball player and who has 22 girlfriends. Is he a good human being just because he's a great basketball player? What is it to be a good person? So I would listen to Jesus and Buddha and all of their friends who emphasize compassion, loving. And I start like we have heard, by loving myself and really caring for me to have the best life I can. And that really means to be as loving as I can. If being loving makes me a good person and I'm egotistical and I want the best for myself, I should become a loving person. Yes? And if I wish the best for you out of my feeling of love and compassion, what do I wish for you? That you become a loving person. Because that's what makes you a good person. And of course, we know if I am compassionate to everybody else, I'm going to get loads of compassion towards me. Yeah, that's true. But that's not what motivates me, is it? Butler is very good about motivation in human beings. Sometimes we have a particular wish to do a particular action, eat the apple. Sometimes we act for principles, abstract principles. One is self-interest, another is benevolence. And these are things built into human nature. Self-interest and benevolence. And above all of them, Butler says, is conscience. And conscience is just that part of me that says, this is the right thing to do. This is not the right thing to do. And that's part of what is, according to Butler, built into us as human beings. So if I have a difficult decision, what do I do about my 22 girlfriends? Oh, that's a difficult decision. Yeah, if I have a difficult decision to make, the fundamental question I should ask is simply, listen to my conscience telling me the right thing to do. Don't even worry about abstract reasons why. Conscience will tell you, do this, don't do that. It's not based on principle. It's based on conscience-generated intuition about particular decisions to make. I like Butler. And good piece of psychology, really. And we can improve on it. But I think it's a good starting point. So, any more questions?
I don't have a question, but a comment I'd like to make. First of all, thank you very much for a wonderful talk. And also, I'd like to share a memory with you. 11 years ago, when I was just fresh out of grad school, and I was fortunate to find a teaching job here at Boğaziçi. But I was all lonely in Istanbul because I did my undergrad in Ankara and graduated in the States, and I didn't know anyone in Istanbul. But fortunately, my colleagues here who are here made me so welcome to this apartment. But you made a special impression on me because you invited the part-time instructors, the summer term instructors to your house for a party.
Oh, yeah.
And gave us some books as presents. So that was so generous of you, and it was something that I'll still remember and cherish. And while organizing this event, so many of your students shared similar sentiments and said wonderful things about this. I'd like to say thank you for being so generous and so loving. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And really, each one of us has that same spirit within us. It's not just this strange person talking now. Each one of us would like to give a party for everybody else and be kind to them. I know that. I've experienced that. 33 years ago, I came here not knowing anything about Boğaziçi. What's that? And I say, okay, I'll come here for 1 year. Okay, who knows? It was like that. And then Pinar Janovi, Yalcin Koç, Gürel Erzik, and Arda Denkel, Zeynep, and the people I got to know, teachers and students, were just the way you described me. They were kind, thoughtful. They really were. I'm not just saying empty words. And I stayed here 33 years, and I'm not going now. Because of that, because of the people here. We are more human than Americans in this country, I think. I've learned a lot, and we can practice that. I would say begin by working at being conscious, and then work at becoming loving. That strikes me as a good project, and I think we're all on the road to that. Yeah. So, any other people?
I was going to ask another question, but the moment has passed, so it has been already discussed. But first of all, I want to thank you that you brought these people together to make a community after all these years. You made this effort, so I think it's very valuable, and I appreciate it. And I remember, I think the previous meeting, like 18 years ago, and they asked you a question about staying here after graduating from Yale and studying in the United States, so you prefer to live here, and you answered as Kısmet. So explain me that. What do you think about as a philosopher of life? And so I need to say that I enjoyed the last class that I took from you today, and I think it's a very good farewell. But I know that this would not be the end, so we will start again.
Yes,
maybe
yes.
together.
Yes.
So thanks a lot.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, was it easier or harder to understand and construct I for you living in Turkey instead of United States? But
Yeah.
I know that maybe after all these years asking about you such a question, maybe a bizarre one, I would love to learn.
I think it helps us. Yes, I think it helps us. You were the Kismet authority, not me. But it looks good to me. But I think that, well, if you can participate in two very different communities, you see more. So I've lived in several different countries and benefited from that. And I would say if somebody's whole education is at Boğaziçi, maybe they lose out on some of the diverse inspiration they would get from another university. Get your bachelor's degree here, go to Koç for a master's degree, go to E2, or go to this man's university in Ankara. And get some variety, hear different voices. And just on the street, you're aware of different cultures, that wake you up and help you to be conscious what's happening. Yes. Why are these people behaving in these abnormal ways? Yes. And then we learn something. Yeah. Yeah.
We have last 3 questions, and lots of people are thanking you, and including Ilhan Inan, sending you greetings and love. He says he will come to the dinner.
Wonderful. We're going to have dinner. Let's do it. Yes.
Last 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for the wonderful talk. I took one of your classes maybe 7 years ago, at least now.
Really?
And as a cognitive science master's student.
7 years.
And then I become a technologist and working closely with the other technologists and building AI and other technologies, basically. And now you're bringing something new to the to how I understood philosophy all these years as a cognitive scientist. After AI replicated most of our human capacity, including how we assess each other's consciousness as well.
Yeah.
What's left uniquely human to us is a question that is more relevant for everyone now. Because the capacity to love, capacity to experience our world.
Yes.
And what's more left to it, what's uniquely human, it's somehow relevant again after like many years of Descartes and all these like Asian philosophers and
Yes.
and I think it is I take it as an invitation as philosophers to experience more and experiment with this unique first-person perspective tool of ourselves and exercise what's uniquely left for us to experience.
Well, that's right. That's right. And really, please keep working on AI, because here's a situation that reminds me of scrambled eggs and ketchup. Suppose it happens one day that there is a machine capable of doing everything that I can do. Everything. It writes better papers. It's more rational and more just than I can be. It does everything. It duplicates. And one way of looking at that is what a great triumph for the AI industry to produce a machine that can duplicate a human being. That's the way ketchup affects scrambled eggs, but it goes in 2 directions. I would look on it as bad news about me. A machine is able to do everything I can do. That means I have failed to be a person. We see this in movies, videos these days. You know, machines taking over our lives. We've seen several philosophical movies like that. And a machine ought to remind me of how I transcend it. That's how a machine can be useful to me. And then let's do the transcending. Yeah.
Last 2 questions. One is, how do you weave the bridge between indexical facts and non-indexical facts? Are they parallel universe of truth? Or is there a secret passageway, perhaps a transition manual between the two that we have simply failed to discover?
Like I was saying, I think indexical facts are uninteresting metaphysically. They are simply more open less informative. Look at the meaning of the subject terms in those two sentences I gave you. The man wearing the blue shirt, lots of information there. It's a definite description. The other one with the word I in it, person. It's just empty of content, that's all. So, and what is really exciting is that these boring, metaphysically uninteresting facts are what we care about. They stand behind every piece of practical reasoning we've ever carried out. Either my desire or the belief that links it with a possible action, one of those must be expressed in terms of I. Because it draws the conclusion, I must do this action. And if there's an I in the conclusion, and it's valid reasoning, there must be an I in one of the premises. It's quite simple. It matters. The indexicality of some of these boring facts is all important in our practical life. That's what's kind of interesting about this. Yeah. Leibniz makes this move. Leibniz says, if we're aware of the concept I, it will encourage us to think metaphysically about immaterial substances like ourselves and about God. I think he misses what it really does. Indexical thought prepares us to do voluntary actions. And even if a monad turns into a great metaphysician, before that monad does it, he's going to be carrying out voluntary actions based on his I understanding. We can't do without that concept I. It doesn't tell us anything about the nature of the I. That's the metaphysical question we haven't even touched on. And it's a huge question, a very important question. But we're talking about what's important in morality, in practical life, our concept of me. And now I'll tell you one other thing. People like Schopenhauer and Kant have told us, I cannot get any knowledge about the subject. And Schopenhauer says, the knowing subject gets the knowledge, we can never have knowledge about the knowing subject. And Kant in the Transcendental Deduction talks similarly. It's where Schopenhauer got this point. Kant says there, I can know that I exist, but I can't know what I am. I don't know if I'm totally this, but that's wrong. Of course I can get self-knowledge. So why do they make these big mistakes? There's a whole tradition. Wittgenstein says, there is no knowing subject. Forget it. Sartre says, Wittgenstein's right. There's no ego. All it is consciousness. I I think I know some truths about me. I think there is an I, and I would love to know its metaphysical nature. Many different theories about that. I've mentioned a few that I would like you to think about on the second page. And I have some recommended readings. Not because they know the truth, but because these are books that actually stimulate us into doing the hard work of getting wisdom. They are helpful in that way. Not so much that they give us truth, but they help us in our effort to do so.
I also had a story that I wanted to tell.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
About your contribution to my life. It was 8 years ago. I attended your class on the SAP. And you know, the first assignment you gave was, who am I? And we were asking Professor Voss about the guidelines, how to write this, you know, 1.5 space or whatever. And you said, just do as you want. And it was really an anxious thing because we are really used to having really formal guidelines and how to do the stuff. Yeah. And after I wrote mine, there was this beautiful woman in the class who was also attending this course. And I wanted to have a context to talk with her. And I offered her to exchange our assignments. Like, who am I? Who am I? Yeah, and I thought it is really a practical application of how you take this connection between philosophy and life, and love, of course. And it was like a virtual first date where we reading in our rooms, who are we? And then we had like a vision. It was like a sentimental CV, you know, having who you are as published, because in academia we also learn how to use the dialectical method, you know, having disputations and having arguments, you know, the Popperian attitude. You have to put your head, and in a paper about who am I, you don't use arguments and you just put yourself forward as you wish. You ponder on a different way of doing philosophy, and I'm really grateful that you teach us that attitude. It is similar to what in Turkey we say meşk, like the instructive attitudes of a teacher and a student, but often it means also compassion and sharing that the mutual love you have for a craft, and you learn through your love of the ones that share that interest. So thank you, Stephen.
Oh, what a good story.
Yeah, we have a flower.
On behalf of all of your students, it was something for you to remind us, your students.
You made me into a more loving year.
Thank you.
Let's gather in the middle so that we can take a photo.
If you don't mind excusing the applause, maybe we can take a beautiful photo.
Okay, I have one more thing to say. So given that picture, I know you're going
Everybody come this part.
One more story. One more story before we go. Cindy, one more story before we go. One more story. This is from a book by Jacob Needleman that I recommend reading. And he's talking about Nasruddin. Nasruddin suddenly realized he did not know who he was. He rushed into the streets hoping to find someone who might recognize him. The crowds were thick, but he was in a strange town, and he found no familiar face. Suddenly, he found himself in a carpenter's shop. "What can I do for you?" asked the craftsman, stepping forward. Nasruddin said nothing. "Perhaps you would like something made from wood?" "First things first," said the mullah. "Now, did you see me come into your shop?" "Yes, I did." "Good. Now, have you ever seen me before in your life?" "Never in my life." "Then how do you know it's me?"